This time on KEI Fabrication.
Alright folks, what we got going on today is I kind of had my first breakdown that actually caused me a roadside repair with the Mazda. Alright folks, what we got going on today is I kind of had my first breakdown that actually caused me a roadside repair with the Mazda. And what ended up happening is I never put a pre-filter in line with the pump. I thought I did a good job cleaning the tank out, and what I believe happened is some debris got into the pump. Some metal filings left over when I modified the tank, or even I think I actually found a piece of MIG wire that was left over from when I put the fittings in the tank, and it made its way into the pump and it seized the pump. Fortunately, I had a spare in the toolbox of the truck and I was able to repair it in about 20 minutes and get back on the road and make it home. So at this point, I did try an aftermarket eBay pump. It was the $30 China version of the Bosch one. I would say that pump would work well for a daily driver application. However, I don't think it really had the oomph, if you will, of the Bosch pump. When I put the spare Bosch pump back in, I really noticed the difference in the way the truck ran. It just seemed to run better. So in the process, I had mentioned before, in case you haven't seen any of my videos, when I installed the inline pump, I used the same size feed line going from the tank to the pump as I did going from the pump to the regulator up at the intake manifold. What I'm going to do is take this opportunity to put number 10 line in and number 10 fittings through the filter and to the feed of the pump. And the theory is that if your line is larger for the gravity feed aspect to the pump, then the output line, hopefully the volume will be sufficient and not have the pump starve or cavitate. Hey folks, so I'm going through the effort of trying to make this fuel system as efficient as possible, and I noticed a couple of things. The fittings that came with this aftermarket fuel filter, it's kind of neat. It's a nice filter. It looks high quality. It came with -10 fittings, -8, and -6. However, this is the -10 fitting that I purchased to go into the tank. I've got an NPT, 3/8 NPT, and it has just slightly less than a 1/2 inch diameter hole. You can see that we can put in our step drill here all the way. This last one is a 1/2 inch, and so it's just slightly less than a 1/2 inch through hole. However, if we look at the fitting that came with the pump filter, you can see that it is a much smaller diameter hole. And let me see if I can get the camera to focus on the comparison. I don't know if you can see that, but to compare it to, this is the 3/8 step in there, and it's just barely less than 3/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stick these in the lathe, and I'm going to open them up to the maximum diameter. I'm going to put a 1/2 inch through hole through both of these fittings. Now, the other thing I noticed when I took the pump apart is So this would be the input side of the pump, the fuel would come through. You can see that there again, it's down to a 3/8 diameter hole, so the fuel would flow from the tank into this fitting, through the filter, out of the filter, and then out the other end of the filter housing to feed the pump. And you can see that it's actually stepped. It has a generous opening, and then it necks down to a very small opening. So I am also going to put this in the lathe and open that up so we can just get no restrictions from the tank to the pump. If we're going to go through this effort, it's worth the half hour or so it's going to take to open up these fittings and get them to flow the maximum amount of rate that we can. Again, this filter housing was an eBay thing. I think I paid $40 for everything. It's all anodized. I kind of like it. It's supposed to be a stainless steel filter, and I got this one rather than a paper element just because it's supposed to be E85 compatible, and someday maybe we'll get to the E85 tune. We'll see. So for now, I'm just going to stick these fittings in the lathe. We're going to open them up to the maximum diameter that's allowed, and just kind of doing the pre-assembly and some investigation as to how all this stuff looks to me. So I will do that, and then once I get everything kind of pre-assembled, then I'll bring the truck in and we'll do the actual install. Alright folks, so what I've done is I've run a 1/2-inch drill through all of these. This was down to less than 3/8, now it's open to 1/2 inch. Same thing with the tank fitting, the 3/8 NPT. That actually had a step in it. It was 7/16 on one side, 1/2 inch on the other. Not sure why. Something to check. You know, these are eBay China fittings. Maybe the best interest of performance and flow isn't their priority. You know, manufacturing and costs might be the other, so it's up to you to take it to the next level. Same thing with the fittings that go into the pump itself. And now that they're done, I'll blow them off good, make sure they're good and clean. I know some of you may realize that I've taken the anodizing off, and it's going to cause problems if we ever run on alcohol. I'm just going to have to be aware of that and maintain it accordingly. If I ever run alcohol-based fuels, I'll have to run some petroleum product through it to try to minimize the corrosion and the alcohol attacking the bare aluminum. I'm aware of it, and I understand that that condition exists. I'm just going to have to manage it. To be honest with you, 93 octane is the goal. Again, I'll just have to keep an eye on things. If I ever go to E85, I don't know if my injectors will ever handle that. That's another whole phase of this project that maybe will come about at the point we come to at putting a power adder on. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Hey folks, I just kind of discovered an issue with this pump that I think is kind of a design flaw. This is the other side of the filter, and this is the exit side. And you can see the filter just kind of pushes on the original fitting that I showed you prior to. It looks like that was supposed to reach up into this tapered section to put some pressure on the filter to keep it from falling off. And when you put this end of the fitting on and bottom it out, these are all O-ring bodies, which I think is very nice. I can still put my finger in there, see if you can see this happening here, and move this filter around. There's nothing capturing that filter element from popping off of its connection on this end of the filter. So I'm going to have to come up with something. I'm thinking a stainless steel spring that would compress enough to hold that on there. If I don't, just the vibration alone, I believe, will rattle that filter element off. Even the gravity feed pressure might do it. If this was used on the pressure side of the pump, I think you would blow that element right off, and I think you'd lose all of your filtering capabilities. It would be like not having any filter at all. As a matter of fact, if it bottoms out underneath this thing, it may end up acting like a check valve. So something to be aware of if you ever buy one of these ADCO inline filter. I don't know if it's just was missing a component when it was shipped, or if it's truly a factory defect or design flaw. So I'm going to run to the hardware store and get a stainless steel spring and put it in there to make sure that that element stays connected to the input side and doesn't break loose and just lose the whole point of having a filter. Hey folks, I ran down to the hardware store and out of the bin I just selected a couple of springs. I went with this one because the filter element has a taper on it, a little recess in it that this conical spring actually fits inside, so I think that'll help keep it centered. What I did have to do, because the inside of this was tapered, is I stuck it in the lathe and I used a boring bar bit to put a shoulder in there, and this is just the right diameter now to where this spring actually snaps inside and it kind of holds on to it. So when I put this thing together, you can look down inside, hopefully you can see that. It pushes on the element, and when I tighten it up, it puts a few pounds of pressure on the element to force it into the receiver on the bottom end, and I think we're going to go with that. So I kind of like it. This spring probably would have worked, although it's would have had to put a larger shoulder in there, and also it didn't have the taper on it like the conical spring does to fit in the detent that's in the element body itself. So I think this should solve the issue. It should stop the filter from rattling off. If you ever buy one of these, you can go to Ace Hardware and you're going to have to do the modification, put that shoulder on the inside so that spring can fit in there and hold that element on. Like I say, if you don't do this, I think if you've already got this on your car and you take it apart, you'll find that the element has shaken loose off of the area that's machined for the one end of the filter on the inlet side, and I think that filter probably in there rattling around, and what's really happening is you're not filtering the fuel at all. You're just bypassing the filter because it's loose and shaking around. So again, ADCO, got it off of eBay. It was 40 bucks. It came with all the AN fittings. Like I said, I had to take the AN fittings and open them up a little bit because I just didn't like the restriction. And this is no pressure fuel flow, so any restriction, anything you can do to open it up is, we don't need velocity, we need volume. So how do you do that? You get the largest opening you can. So all of these are opened up to the exact same size as the Dash 10 other fittings and the Dash 10 line itself. So it took a little longer just to do something simple as get a filter ready to go on, but I feel a lot better. You never know when your fuel system is right on the edge of being acceptable or not, and if you reach that border, this is going to give you the ability to extend the range of your fuel system just a little bit more. So hopefully we'll benefit from all these little mods. Just like anything else, when you buy stuff, you take it out of the box. Sometimes it's not a good idea to just take it out of the box and throw it right in. This issue with the filter shaking loose, I'm sure it would have happened. I probably wouldn't have found it until someday when I decided I was going to check the filter or clean it, or I ran into another issue with contamination in my fuel pump. I would have found it. So it always pays to take this stuff out of the box, really to pay attention to what you're seeing and make any necessary adjustments. So alright, now I'm really going to bring the truck inside and start swapping this stuff out. Okay folks, I am about to drain the tank and I'm going to run a new number 10 line from here. I have a number 6 in there right now, and it's just going to follow along the tank. I'm going to put a generous loop on here. I'm hoping that that little filter will go right about here, and as soon as I get some of that stuff mocked up, I will show you. So you can see I got the dash 10 fitting in the tank. The other thing I did was to try to increase the flow is I put 1-inch spacers between the factory tank bracket and the tank itself to try to get the tank to slope a little bit more towards the rear of the vehicle, just to try to keep fuel back here as much as possible. Again, it's a factory tank. There's no sump in it like the kits you buy from Moroso to add the sump on the bottom of the tank. But so we're getting there. Alright folks, we've got the number 10 line here running across. We got our bracket for the fuel filter. The line goes under the gas tank protector, back out through the cross member and into the new Bosch 044 pump, and then into our -6 feed line. So pretty happy the way everything turned out. Got plenty of clearance through the frame, and I added the slope to the tank like I showed you, and I'm going to lower the vehicle down, put some fuel in it, and make sure there's no leaks. So let's see if this thing fires up. Alright folks, it's up and running. I got the regulator set for about 55 psi, and had to cycle the pump a few times to get the pressure up and bleed the air out of the system, and it fired right up. I'm going to raise it up and check for leaks. Alright, we got it up in the air, it's running. I have 0 leaks. I'm very happy. Just checking the pump. So the new Bosch pump is actually fairly quiet once the truck is up and running. The bypass is working well, so the pump's not overworking, and we should be in good shape. We'll put some miles on it this week. I'll be driving another 25 to 50 miles a day in the next 5 days, so we'll make sure it holds up good. Okay folks, so this is the, I think it's a $30 eBay pump that I bought. There's really nothing wrong with the pump. It didn't fail me because it was defective. It failed because a piece of debris went through and locked it up. I've since got it to free up, and it runs. It'll make a good spare for a transfer pump or something like that. I didn't race it with this pump. The first race that I did, just testing the truck out, was with a Bosch 044. Now I ruined the first Bosch 044 because I made a mistake. I ran it without a fuel pressure regulator. I misinterpreted how the fuel pressure was going to get regulated, and so it was deadheading the whole time the thing was running. It lasted about a month before I realized that I had to put a external regulator in the system and get it going again. So this is actually the original Bosch pump that I put in. This pump actually got me home. When this one seized up, this one was in my toolbox. This actually got me home. This pump actually works, except for when it gets hot, like a real hot day, 90 degrees out. The pump gets lazy and then eventually won't run. So in the cold weather, it actually is a good pump. And I'm going to put this right back in the toolbox as a spare.
Next time on KEI Fabrication.
Hey folks, welcome back. As you can see, the Mazda's up on the lift. I got myself a little bit of jam. I was on my way to work this morning. The alternator died and I ended up having to call my wife to bring the battery jump box